But we can't do that until we start talking. And well, really, we should take a moment of silence for the team that we're going to talk about first. It is a sad day in DP Podland when Minnesota United miss out on the playoffs. I guess you could call it karma. I guess you can call it comeuppance. I guess you can call it paybacks. We're family friendly pod, so I can't say it. Minnesota United finish in 11th place this year. Oh, so sad. Enemies of the pod are on 41 points, one game out of the last play-in game spot. They were impacted by many factors, including needing to win out their last two games and to get some help. And their only logical decision was to fire their manager in the middle of that playoff push. They would end up falling short on the last day of the season to Kansas City, who is fighting for that same spot on decision day on a win and get in moment. And we're going to talk about what went wrong. Connor, I'm going to ask you first. What do you think went wrong?
Wow, I get to start this time?
Yeah.
So I was telling you about my new setup ahead of the episode, and I jokingly talked about crunching numbers. But here's the thing. That's not a joke. I did crunch some numbers. And you can call me a nerd all you want. I don't really care.
You are a nerd.
I come prepared with the facts. And one of the facts is that Minnesota was very inconsistent in their attack and defense. So
Wow.
I wanted to check the team's performance in the attack and the defense, and I used Teemu Pukki's first game against Austin to be that divider in the season. So I took a look at, I'll call it the BP before Pukki era, and then we take a look at the AP, the after Pukki era. And in the before Pukki era, what the numbers showed is that this team was allergic to goals. And that's for many reasons. No Teemu Pukki, no Reynoso for a lot of it. But the team could not score, and they had a 1.11 goals per game rate. On the flip side, they were actually a pretty strong defensive team. They had 1.32 goals conceded per game. And this strong defensive effort is really what kept them in the playoff push. Without this strong defensive play, this team probably wouldn't have been in the hunt on the final day. But then we flip it and we look at the after Pukki era. And both metrics changed. So they went from 1.11 goals per game to 1.67 goals per game. A big jump up there, nearly half a goal per game. A lot of that will have to do with them bringing in Pukki, having Reynoso finally fully back. That's definitely going to be a big factor. The issue is that all of a sudden this team just forgot how to play defense. And they went from 1.32 goals conceded per game to 1.73, almost conceding 2 goals a game, which is not good enough to help you make that playoff push. So while the attack drastically improved, the defense kept not they were unimproving. That's probably not even a word, but it kept it so that the fact that they were still conceding more goals per game despite this giant bump up in goals scored. And no better competition showed this than the Leagues Cup. The Leagues Cup, they were scoring a whopping 2.2 goals per game. They were banging in goals for fun. And I think we will all remember Leagues Cup Hlongwane because he was unreal in that tournament. The issue is that they conceded 2.6 goals per game in that tournament. They were shipping goals for fun. They are like the Amazon of shipping goals. So I checked Transfer Market because I wanted to see maybe this was a change in system that caused them to start conceding more goals. Maybe bringing in Pukki, having Reynoso finally kind of back involved in the team. Maybe they had to change things up in the way that they play. But what I saw was that in the AP era, the after Pukki era, they were mainly playing a 4-2-3-1. And this is not a foreign tactic to them because they played this 7 times during the BP era. So not necessarily a change in their tactic that may have necessarily caused them to start conceding more goals. I mean, I didn't watch Minnesota week in, week out, so maybe there was a just different style in the way that they played in the 4-2-3-1, but Just looking at a straight up formation, it didn't really look like much had changed. So, from a solution standpoint, we'll talk a little. I'm going to talk a little bit about the defense later. Spoiler alert. But maybe it comes from a lack of depth in the defense. Tapias and Boxall played nearly 3,000 minutes each just in the MLS regular season. So it really wouldn't surprise me too much if they were starting to lose a bit of steam towards the end of the season, especially when one of the two of them is 35 years old. So I'm not going to go too much into the solution more because I do want to talk about this more as another point later on, but I'll leave it at that.
I'll build off of it then. First of all, it's been a while since you've hit the world with your key phrase, man. You had it right there on a silver platter.
The kid, wrong side of 30. It
Yeah,
has been a while
he's on the
since I brought
wrong
that out.
side of 30. I haven't heard that in years.
It's true. It's true. It's
I thought it was coming. I was so excited, but it wasn't.
I'm
Um,
sorry. I will have to reiterate. I'll have to add it into my stuff going forward.
yeah, you're gonna have to. It's a staple, man. It's a staple of
It
what
is
we
a
do.
staple.
I'll build off of that and talk about over reliance on one player or underperformance of multiple players, I guess is a better way to put it. And very much like you, I went and dived into individual, right? So um you just talked about Bongi Hlongwane stepping up into a role not many expected him to step up into. 8 league goals in just under 2,500 minutes or so. And he had 7 League Cup goals to boot.
Oh my
Um,
God, he had 7.
it's 7 of them.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think he won Golden Boot, and they didn't make it out of. I don't think they made it out of the first round.
No, they made it
Did they
pretty
go
far.
deep?
They won a couple knockout games.
Okay, I couldn't remember. I thought it was the reason I thought that because it was really funny. Like if he just blows up, but you mentioned how bad they were defensively, and it didn't work for him. Um, the issue is the rest of this team was just abysmal in front of goal until Timo Pukki joined the party, right? So, um, Mender Garcia, designated player, 3 goals, 1 assist. Luis Amaria, 2 goals. Ishmael Tajuri Shroudy, 1 goal, 2 assists. Franco Fragapane, who we thought was a baller when he first joined here, and he was, 1 goal, 2 assists. Sanbin Jeong, a U22 signing, 1 goal, 1 assist. Robin Ludd, who was injured for most of the season, but 0 goals, right? Players that you expect to step up into roles of assistance for these big key players, ghosting. And you cannot ask for a team of 3 people, and I include Pookie when he joined the team, to carry your entire team forward. You just can't do it. So definitely disappointing in the attack for them for sure.
Yeah, it's a great catch. I think that explains their metric a lot. The change in the goal scoring once they brought in Pookie. Finally, someone who could finish off these chances. It really started to spike in their goals per game. But I already kind of led into what my next point was, but bad defensive depth. That's what I'm going to make my point to here. So, I want to continue on to what I was talking about there in a little bit more depth and explore the solution a little bit more here. So, as I said before, they went from a team that was conceding 1.32 goals per game at the start of the season, and then finished the season with conceding 1.73 goals per game. So, really, in this new era of MLS and MLS related competitions, I think you can just not get away with not utilizing depth anymore. So, on top of 34 regular season games, Minnesota also added 5 games to the Leagues Cup and another 3 games for the US Open Cup, meaning that they finished with 42 games played on the season. And that's with them not even being involved in CCL nor the playoffs. Tapias, Boxall, and DJ Taylor all played over 3,000 minutes this season across all competitions. So, in my opinion, it's really no wonder that if they were to lose steam at the end of the season, it just would not be surprising. I mean, that's a lot of minutes to put on legs, especially a 35-year-old wrong side of 30, Michael Boxall. Quite frankly, when I look at the team's defense, I kind of understand why they had to play them so often because there's just not a lot of depth there. So center back depth really consisted of aging players past their prime, like Kallman and Dibassy. And then there's one other center back, which is a very young and unproven Mikael Marquez. And then when it comes to the outside back depth, it might be even worse than the center back depth. If you consider Valentin as the team's starting left back, I know that position kind of rotated a decent amount, but if you consider Valentin to be the starting left back, that leaves Bristow, who came over from Tranmere Rovers in League Two, and 2 academy players. So really not a lot of depth on fullbacks. The solution, in my opinion, and I understand that the league's financial rules make it a huge detriment to try to properly build depth in this league. But I think with the ever growing, no end in sight level of competitions that MLS teams are getting involved in, I think they need to invest in better depth in the defense. Other teams are able to figure it out, whether it's a combination of being able to properly integrate youngsters or finding those good TAM GAM level deals. But I think they really have to improve in building the depth of the defense. So, I think each year, I know you know the financials better than I do, but I think the TAM GAM budgets get a little bit better each year.
They do.
So I think they need to use that to make the most out of bringing in signings from within the league, guys who have experience and can be that guy to step up and soak up some minutes. I think definitely utilize the academy guys when you can. I think that's definitely important as well. But having some proven players on some TAM GAM deals would be super helpful so that they can jump into more of the important games or competitions.
Yeah. A lot of words there to say MLS roster rules hold people back because it's MLS 4.0 and you're going to invest in 7-8 games, not 1-0 games, right? But I don't disagree with you, right? If you want to be, and I think we're talking a lot about the future of MLS and where they're talking about a fourth DP and changing the salary cap and blah 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 blah. All great, right? All awesome. But it's all about where you utilize that space because as long as you have restrictions, you're going to have people who are prioritizing one area over the other. And it usually will end up being attacking level players because one DP level center back doesn't make you a top level team. One DP level number 10 can take you from bottom to top in a year. So be interesting to see how that works. Speaking of game-changing number 10s, the fact that theirs didn't show up for 2 months, probably a big reason of why they weren't successful, right? As we saw in one of our recently posted TikTok MLS trivias, Reynoso led the entire league in shot creating action per 90 with a value of at least 8, if not a little bit more, per 90 minutes that he played. This would have been amazing if he didn't wait until a month and a half before the League Cup to get here. Those 8 chances per 90 might have actually led to some more points in the first half of the season. When he joined Minnesota, they were bang average. They were 5-5-6. Every loss except one game was by 1 goal. You're telling me that if he's not involved in all the games that he missed, that they're not picking up at least some points from it, right? They're not picking up a draw to a win or a win to or a loss to a draw, right? It would change the whole thought process by the end of the year too, right? If you're within 1 point instead of 3 points in that last game, maybe Adrian Heath sticks around, right? If you're in that spot and you have a 4-point lead going into the last 2 games of the season, maybe they stick around and they make a run or something. That month and a half, I know it doesn't feel like it because they did start off kind of hot. That month and a half hurt. How do you fix it? Make him show up. I don't know. I don't know how you fix. I don't know how you fix something like
Hold
that.
him against his will.
Yeah, don't let him go home. I don't know how you fix something like that. That's just kind of that's the crazy stuff about again. If you're going to have a league where your big 3 players, you have to hit on them, and we're going to talk about this later, and one of them just doesn't show back up, well, that kind of sucks because now you're trying to figure out how to put pieces together without being able to bring in replacements, right? So,
yeah, that's a tough one, but I mean, I think maybe a solution is to try and set yourselves up that if your key guy is not here, you can still manage to get results. I know it's tough because I know there's a number of teams where if you took their key guy out, the teams would just fall apart. But maybe they're relying too much on one guy for their team.
That's what Grace is telling me right now. She goes, Tom Barlow should have had 4,000 minutes this year. The fact that he didn't is the reason Red Bull didn't make it past the second round or the first round of the playoffs.
Tom Barlow to Minnesota. Who
Ooh,
says no?
I think Minnesota. if I had to guess.
That's fair. That's probably a fair guess.
What's your third point?
All right. So my third point, I'm gonna go with stale tactics. So I don't mean this to be a dig at Adrian Heath, because I think overall, I think he did a good job across his time with Minnesota, but it felt like the team wasn't making progress forward anymore, and I think they needed to change. So while he was at Minnesota, which began in their expansion year in 2017, he had gotten the team to a top 10 finish in the Supporter Shield only twice and only got past the first round of the playoffs once, which was during the COVID year. I personally think there's enough talent in this team that they should be capable of doing more in the playoffs. And certainly should have been making the playoffs in a year where 64% of the conference made it. And I know you kind of talked about it already, but this season had a few bumps, namely the Reynoso saga at the start of the season, which, had those things not happened, surely this team would be in the playoffs. But there was still, I feel like, more than enough time from when Reynoso came back that they still could have made it into the expanded playoffs. So the solution, I mean, it's already in progress. The team split with Adrian Heath towards the end of the season, as you mentioned. I think it was like 2 games left in the season, and they were still in the playoff hunt. That's certainly an interesting choice, but so that's already the right start, I would say. The next step, I would say, is a tough one because this isn't exactly the same situation as a Toronto where you can just bring in a coach, blow up the team, and let him bring in whoever he wants. I think there's already a really good core here. So it'd be, in my opinion, it'd be dumb to blow it up for a new coach. I think you got to try to find someone who can work with the guys that are already on the roster and just kind of fill in the rest of the holes. And in my opinion, unless something gets released about what has happened, I think any team without a head coach should be foaming at the mouth for a chance to sign Bruce Arena right now.
Charlotte want him so bad.
I don't blame him. In my opinion, I think he would genuinely take this team to the next level. So my solution, I mean, maybe it's an obvious one, but throw your hat in the Bruce Arena ring.
I mean, yeah, who wouldn't want to see Omar Gonzalez and Josie Altidore run it back in Minnesota when it's minus 12 degrees in February?
Hook it
I
to
don't know
my
about
veins.
you, but hook that to my veins, right? Emma Boateng
We
too.
we
Oh
need
yeah.
new ones. He can't repeat players that he already brought from New England. He needs new aging US players. Bill Hamid makes a comeback, I think.
Oh my god.
Who else? I don't know. We could probably have a whole episode on that.
Oh, that'd be
Ali
hilarious.
Bedoya, he's available.
Ideal Bruce Arena team. That is hilarious. My third point was also Adrian Heath themed, right? And I think they just had a lack of faith in him. They were in within touching distance of the playoffs and then firing your coach. It points directly to not trusting him in the big moments. And that's not a one season thing. Over the last few years, he's slowly been losing the faith of the front office and the fans and maybe even the locker room at this point. His team has not scored over 50 goals since 2019, which is also the last time he had a positive goal differential in a season. They always found themselves just sneaking into the playoffs since then. And Minnesota knows that they want more out of this group. And seeing it happen again on the outside looking in, they were not satisfied with just making the playoffs and going. They wanted to be in the top 4. They want to be competing for titles. And Adrian Heath has run his course. I think you mentioned something along those lines where he's kind of stagnated. He's staled. His tactics have stalled, and they had enough. Now, again, we'll talk all the time. When they let him go, they were in the playoffs. They were still fighting for it, but when, at least according to Transfer Market, I could, they might have their dates off by a day because it's a German company, so they're off by like 8 hours or something. So sometimes late day. It's very weird. But To my research, they were in the playoffs with 2 games to go, and they fired. Then they missed out. That will always come up as is this the right decision? Because here's the thing: you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. Look at Sporting Kansas City. I'm trying to think of some other teams that have made Seattle back in 2016 when they started their big run with Nico. If you get in, things can happen. So to make that drastic of a change is always going to be questioned. But as you mentioned, I think Adrian Heath has been fine. I don't think he's been like naturally crazy. I just think his play style has been kind of meh. And because of that, I think that he still will find himself in a coaching role somewhere, right? I think Montreal, DC, Charlotte, all still looking. Charlotte seems like they might be in the Bruce Arena ring, but Adrian Heath at Montreal might be the right answer. DC, maybe, right? Like a guy who's just going to come in and say, this is the style of play we're going to do. We're going to be defensively sound. We're going to sneak goals out. We're going to be, disciplined in each phase of the game. And it may not work in year 1, but by year 2, we're going to, with the right signings and the right people to do the job, we're going to be in the conversation again. Kind of like he did in Minnesota, right? Minnesota comes in, first year they get blown out of the water. He goes, okay, here's this place I'm going to need. I need X, Y, and Z. Give me Ike Opara. Give me Ozzy Alonso. Give me Darwin Quintero. And he takes that team within a game of the U.S. Open Cup. He takes that team within a few games of top of the West. And then, like you mentioned, he kind of stagnates out and he falls out. But I think if you put him somewhere else, you will see the same sort of turnaround. So I think DC should be in that mix for him personally. But that's just me.
I mean, in an era where teams are signing Gary Neville and Chris Armas, to say that Adrian Heath doesn't deserve another job in MLS would be pretty crazy.
I agree 100%.